Chapter 10. Early Upbringing. When we suggest to others that they may have an unresolved negative feeling towards some beloved member of their family, they could become defensive or offended, and respond by not wanting to continue the conversation. The important thing to understand is that there is no blame in these situations. It just is. These people who influenced our early years usually did the best they knew how. As a child, when we established a particular perception, we usually had an incorrect reference point because we were too young to understand and sort out the true picture. Our own lack of maturity, our own lack of wisdom, produced the incorrect perception. Therefore, our perception was usually an illusion. Incorrect or not, that perception has been stored in our cells, in our DNA, covering over the memory of perfection in our original blueprint. These perceptions have been carried with us throughout our years, often creating enormous physical, emotional, or mental pain in some area of our life. Our mind has to draw some conclusions for the discomfort or the pain we feel and have felt at the time the core incident occurred. Consequently, whatever data was available in our subconscious from previous experiences for us to reference determined the belief we established, whether correct or incorrect. Then later, when similar incidents occurred in our lives, any old familiar feelings that were being resurrected responded once again by embracing the same incorrect perception, the same incorrect belief, thereby validating our illusion. Thus, a deeper and deeper endorsement of the discomfort was perpetrated subconsciously. Let us start with the factors described in the beginning of the book concerning our gestation and birth, and add to them the way we were treated by whomever was involved in our world as we grew up. Were we treated with love and acceptance, or did we experience physical, mental, or emotional abuse? Whatever happened to us, these experiences had a profound impact on our concept of self. If a child is abused, he's usually unable to express his feelings of fear, anger, or rage. So these feelings are stuffed inside of him, without a form of verbal expression. When feelings are continually stuffed inside, the child may lash out by being abusive to others, or he may be uncontrollable in different ways. He may become languid or non-communicative and withdrawn, or he may become ill. The illness at this point will often affect the immune system, especially if the child views the situation as being unalterable, hopeless, or feels there is no way out. Many children who come from an abusive background seem to always want to make things right for everyone. Their inner core has been so painfully violated that they want peace at all costs. They walk around in fear and trembling, hoping that they will never be the focal point of anyone's verbal or physical disapproval. A child's identity evolves around family members. In an abused child's pure intent to make things right for everyone around him as he's growing up, he finds himself taking care of others at the expense of his own feelings and needs. Consequently, the child has no identity of his own. This is what is known as codependency. More often than not, the child does not approve of himself because he feels somehow that it was his fault he was abused. He always worries about other people's feelings rather than his own. He continually tries to make things right for everyone else, regardless of what he wants. Because it's impossible for him to make things right for everyone else, He then views himself as incapable, unimportant, as a failure. Because of his inability to change things for the better for others, he particularly feels worthless. In his eyes, he is responsible for all of the problems, regardless of what they are. By always worrying about others and trying to meet everyone else's needs, the child shuts down his own feeling system to the point of not having any sense of who he is or where he is going. He thrives on constant outside approval. In fact, he needs it. When outside approval is not forthcoming, this compounds his disapproval of himself. Ironically, in reality, it's this disapproval of self that creates the lack of approval from others. The codependent stays in a catch-22 situation, cycling through the same scenario over and over again. So a person with these kinds of experiences will commonly end up a loner, or go from one relationship to another, continually looking for and seeking approval. These people often become involved with abusive people, and when their relationships don't work out, they always feel responsible for its failure. This compounds the feeling of worthlessness, which is one of the most common codependent traits. Sooner or later, though, the erroneous programming with its resultant negative feelings, which have been trapped inside since childhood, those feelings that are in the cell memory at the core, finally come to the point where they have to be recognized and acknowledged in order to correct or alter the behavior patterns. If this never happens, the codependent is very miserable emotionally all his life. In quantum healing, Dr. Chopra states, "This core is where healing begins. To go there and learn to promote the healing response, you must get past all the grosser levels of the body, cells, tissues, organs, and systems, and arrive at the junction point between mind and matter, the point where consciousness actually starts to have an effect." Note the word consciousness. When a person is willing to be conscious, to recognize and own the negative feelings that have been buried alive, these feelings, these vibrations, can then be dramatically transformed by embracing positive opposite feelings. This in turn engenders a new and higher vibratory environment within that person. This now new, healthier, higher vibratory environment indicates a restructuring and reordering that begins the healing process. One classic example of this sad state of negative emotions happened to a lady I knew. Brenda was in her 40s. When I heard her story, I could not believe that any one person could have experienced so much emotional pain as a child and still be alive and functioning. After hearing her account of sexual abuse by her father and other male members of her family, we processed with the script many feelings that she had bravely buried, feelings that definitely needed a resolution and healing in her life. Sometimes it is necessary to process many feelings during one session. As in the case with Brenda, who lived in a different state than I, she expressed to me that she felt a definite emotional shift on the inside. Before we completed our initial time together, I later phoned Brenda to see how she was feeling. She indicated that the difference in her, the shift and the change she was experiencing, was much greater than she had ever anticipated. Although Brenda rarely confided in anyone, she'd always yearned for love and understanding from others at a deep level of her soul. Without having to reveal her abuse, her horrible emotional trauma as a girl. Most of her life she had felt an underlying desire to explain to people what she had been through so that they would better understand her. Now that desire to justify herself and what had happened to her earlier in life was totally eliminated. She no longer felt the need to explain her hurt, her distrust of men, her guilt, or the shame that she had carried inside of her for years. She continued to use the script on her own. In a short time she had made such progress that she felt a peaceful freedom and release she had never before experienced. If you haven't encountered an emotional crisis or health crisis in your life, and you identify with what you're reading, let me encourage you to take and make note of the feelings you may have stored and stuffed for years, thinking they are dead and buried. For example, have you forgiven your mother for letting your dad take advantage of her? And have you forgiven your dad for taking advantage of your mother? Have you forgiven your father for all the times he verbally humiliated you? Have you forgiven your sister for, as you perceive it, being prettier than you? Have you forgiven your brothers and sisters for not understanding you or picking on you? Or does the resentment go much deeper? Have you forgiven other family members for their wrong acts or actions as you perceive them? Have you forgiven your least favorite teacher in school for embarrassing you in front of the rest of the class when you were talking instead of listening? These kinds of negative feelings can be so embedded and at such great depth that they remain a subconscious, overwhelming, moving force in your life. Remember, these feelings are powerful. They're living energies. And the examples mentioned are very minor compared to some of the more serious anger, hate, and resentment that people are carrying around inside of them. Hate, anger, resentment, and desire for revenge are energies that can eat you alive. Tom was a client who was so filled with these feelings that he literally had a darkness about him. When he came into my office, he had so much negativity inside of him that he just spouted off, unleashing his anger and hate for almost 2 hours, blaming everyone he could for his problems. He was a very sick man, with all kinds of allergies and no physical energy whatsoever. Tom was in his early 40s, but seemed 20 years older. It was obvious to me why he was so ill. At this point in his life, however, he was so miserable that he was willing to do anything in order to feel better. Tom didn't really want to let go of his dark feelings. However, he seemed to thrive on them. He kept telling his wife that there was no way he was going to forgive people and things of the past. But his wife finally persuaded him to let his spirit help him change those feelings by going through the script. After about his second visit, Tom didn't appear so dark. He became more cheerful and amiable, and seemed to progressively improve. His pain and discomfort abated, and was no longer there to remind him of the purpose and importance of the script. When he no longer felt miserable, he quit using the script and started slipping back into his old patterns again. He had only scratched the surface of resolving his negative feelings at that point. What I didn't tell you is that, as a child, Tom seemed to be the brunt of his mother's frustrations. For no apparent reason, she would often beat and scream at him unmercifully. He was the oldest of 4, but was the only one who received this treatment. Imagine how that would have caused you to feel if this same thing happened to you. We never know what someone else has had to endure. However, no matter what you've been through, you only hurt yourself when you hang on to the negative feelings. And there is nothing you can do about the past. It's lost, it's gone forever. Your concern is with the now, with the present. It is your choice as to whether things of the past keep you in bondage or give you the key to open the door to freedom. At this writing, Tom is at a crossroads. He will be choosing whether to continue wallowing in his negativity or whether to lift his head up out of the mire and become more aware and more accountable for his feelings, taking whatever steps are necessary to change these poisonous, destructive, negative feelings to positive, productive feelings. Tom does have a choice. Having Tom's life touch mine served as an indelible reminder of how powerful hate, anger, resentment, and a desire for revenge are in bringing someone down, physically and emotionally, in coloring the glasses entirely dark that they see through. How sad it is, especially when underneath all that anger is a real gem with great potential. Even though all of these examples are just about one seemingly insignificant person at a time, when you compound their pain, their hurt, their hate, their fear, their sorrow, their anger, their guilt, their resentment, and their feelings of worthlessness, and their need for approval, then let it resonate with all the other people in the world who have these same kinds of feelings. You end up with millions or perhaps billions of miserable, unhappy, and hurting people. Even so, we have it within our power to do something about it. We can make a difference. How can we make a difference? We can start by creating a shift, making a change in ourselves. To some people, Colette's story may seem simple and unimportant. But here's an example of a girl struggling for her own identity, for acceptance, for approval, and for feelings of self-worth, qualities that everyone would like to enjoy. Colette was a college-age client who constantly needed outside approval. Although she had not been labeled a codependent as such, she had a very strong codependent trait. Colette always needed outside approval to make her feel good about herself, to make her feel worthwhile. She had to be reassured constantly about the quality of her performance, whether it was her schoolwork, her cheerleading, her ability to attract good-looking young men to her, or whatever. She was always seeking outside approval and acceptance. When we finally got right down to the root of this problem, we found that as a child of 5 years, Colette had been singing with a group of children at a program. She didn't know the words to the songs, so she just mouthed the songs. Afterward, one of her aunts came up to her and mentioned that her sister was singing so nicely, and what was the matter with her that she didn't know the words. The overwhelming feeling of disapproval and censure Colette felt from her aunt, whom she dearly loved, immediately caused her to establish a deep negative belief inside of herself that she couldn't express. But the belief, nevertheless, was internalized. This new belief caused her to feel that she must make amends for her unpreparedness forever after gain approval and acceptance in whatever she did. However, the real core of Colette's problem became apparent at a later session. She was a twin, and since birth, Colette had felt that her mother favored her twin over her. Naturally, her mother was deeply hurt when she realized Colette felt this way. Regardless, no matter what, Colette felt that she always needed to prove she was especially worthy of her mother's approval, as well as everyone else's. And this is what incorrect perceptions do to us. Now armed with the realization of what she was feeling, Colette went through the script for the reason I so desperately want and need approval. After using the script for those particular feelings and some appendages to those same feelings, she reported to me that she no longer felt the anxiety she had for so many years of her life. She became much more peaceful and relaxed, and better able to flow with life. There were also some other significant improvements in her day-to-day activities. Colette realizes that other feelings and their resultant incorrect perceptions and beliefs need to be altered and conquered. So she continues to use this process to accomplish her goals. Most of us don't realize we're carrying all that stuff around with us. Stuff that determines our everyday decisions and actions. Stuff that has caused us to be dysfunctional. All of that stuff, which has been affecting us, has influenced us on a subconscious level. There is something else appropriate to mention here. If you were raised in a family with poor or inadequate communication skills, you undoubtedly went around pretending that everything was fine. But in reality, there was much awry and much hurting. Oh, how you longed for a healthy interchange of ideas and communication, sharing experiences and expressing feelings. Who could you talk to? Who could you tell your secrets to? Where could you go for release from the pain? Or did you think if you were quiet, the pain might go away? Or did you just turn your feelings off? A person can actually turn their feelings off so they won't feel the pain, and their reality or method of coping becomes one of non-participation, i.e., it happened to others but not me. What is really happening, however, is that those painful negative feelings and thoughts are getting stuffed deeper and deeper inside because there is no release, no outlet, and no resolution for them. How long can a person continue stuffing and storing before the container is full and there's no room left to stuff or store anymore? When the psyche is no longer able to endure further stuffing and non-resolution of the pain and the hurting, the personality of the hurting person is often driven to split, to literally become another personality, another identity. Then they can be in their own make-believe world, which is totally apart from the real one, rather than having to participate in their old painful world. If we remember that we were totally innocent bystanders as we were growing up, and that these unresolved negative feelings are on a subconscious level, it will help us to recognize and embrace the fact that there is no need for us to spend even one more second in the guilt or blame game. The perceptions from which we viewed our experiences were created and validated in our immature minds before we were able to establish a conscious awareness. At this point now, it is imperative for us to be willing to leave denial behind us, acknowledge our own truth, and wipe the slate clean of the negatives so that we can go about healing our hurting soul, rescuing our true self. Many books have been written about codependency and dysfunctional families. Adult children, as they're called, come from these dysfunctional families where children have been either abused physically, emotionally, or sexually. I have only touched on the subject here, but I would like to supply you with a list of feelings which cause the incorrect perceptions and subsequent beliefs embraced during childhood by children who come from these kinds of homes. These are the feelings which contribute to dysfunction, codependency, and or addictions. Judges self-harshly. Fears criticism and judgment, but critical and judgmental of others. Feels a sense of urgency. Impulsive, impatient. Seeks immediate rather than delayed gratification. Fears failure but sabotages own success. Fears disapproval and rejection, so creates characteristics acceptable to others. Fears commitment. Feels inadequate, low self-esteem. sometimes compensates by appearing superior. Feels discovery of real self will cause rejection. Fears intimacy. Unable to form close, loving, intimate relationships. Fears loving and being loved. Fears dependency on anyone or anything, yet are dependent personalities. Fears abandonment, but continues to be involved with compulsive personalities in order to play out this fear. Frightened of angry people, afraid to trust, due to lack of trust in self. Afraid to reveal inner secrets, for fear of rejection or disapproval. Afraid of people and authority figures. Feels different, separated from others, due to own feelings, which lead to depression. Isolates self. Assumes responsibility for others' feelings and behavior. Grieves for the family they never had. Unable to identify or ask for own wants and needs. Denies them for fear they will not be met. Feels guilty when standing up for self, therefore gives in to others. Unable to feel or express true feelings as adults, because to feel at all has been very painful. In denial. Builds up barriers to protect self from own insecurities. Unable or don't know how to let go, relax, play, or have fun. Criticizes and blames self and others. Makes excuses for others' weaknesses and has unreasonable expectation of self and others. Tries to find own identity in doing things, but finds it difficult to accept honest praise. Desperately wants to control and yet overreacts to changes they can't control. Continually seeks outside approval by doing. Takes things literally. It's either right or wrong, black or white. Takes self very seriously. Distorted sense of responsibility. Concerned more for others than self. Keeps one from looking too closely at self and own problems. Tends to repeat relationship patterns. Has a need to help and seeks people who are victims. Are attracted by that weakness in love and friendship or relationships. Doesn't know self or innate rights. Doesn't realize it's all right to make mistakes. Craves validation of self-worth from others, not received as child. Extremely loyal, even when loyalty is unjustified or even harmful. Guesses at what normal or appropriate is. Tends to be a perfectionist. Unable to trust loved ones, authority figures, or peers. If you find yourself identifying with any of the foregoing feelings or attitudes, changing these feelings and attitudes can be achieved by going through the script for them. Here's an example of how you can accomplish this. Spirit, please locate the origin of my feeling guilty when I stand up for myself. Take each and every level, area, and aspect of my being to this origin. Analyze and resolve it perfectly with God's truth. Come forward in time, healing every incident, based upon the origin, according to God's will, until I'm at the present, filled with light and truth. God's peace and love and forgiveness of myself for my incorrect perceptions. Forgiveness of every person, place, circumstance, and event which contributed to this feeling. With total forgiveness and unconditional love, I delete the old. I release it and let it go now, permanently. I feel perfectly within my rights when I stand up for myself. I feel confident that I am a worthwhile human being and I deserve to come to my own defense. I feel peace of mind when I do. Then finish the script on out. When we look at the negative feelings we buried as a child and participate in processing, by using the script to resolve and heal those negative feelings, little by little, we will be relieved of feelings, emotions, and beliefs that contribute to codependency. Eventually, the memory of perfection in ourselves will be uncovered, reprogrammed, and brought into harmony with our perfect blueprint, with our true self. We can gain our independency, and after we have achieved our independence, we will victoriously experience the crowning touch of rejuvenated, healthy, and rewarding interdependent relationships with all members of society.